about ROI in social media. And I'm just turning on my screen share here, so if you're not seeing anything, go ahead and let us know in kind of the question answer section, and we'll keep an eye out for that and get those issues figured out for you. But thank you again for coming in. The goal today is really to talk about how to make social media an ROI positive channel for B2B marketers. I know that this is a sticking point for a lot of us. In B2B marketing organizations, the name of the game is ROI. We know that we've got to tie things back to revenue, and it's tough to just justify things through brand awareness, branding, and community engagement alone. So today we're really going to be talking about how do we get that ROI out of social. And this is the graphic that really sticks out in my mind, and I'm sure this is very familiar for many of you, is what is the ROI of social media efforts? And when most of us think about this, 70% of us, we just can't quantify it. We just don't know how we can actually tie social back to revenue. And what that means is that social normally gets regulated to being a let's call it kind of community engagement, brand awareness channel, and we justify it as a little bit of a cost center, right? It plays a PR role. We need to keep the lights on. Our competition is there, but we still have this challenge that we're not able to really quantify social media efforts. So let's talk a little bit about agenda. We've got a lot to cover here, and we'll try to make it through everything. If you do have questions, go ahead and put them into the question kind of piece here on the webinar, and what we'll do is we'll kind of address those as they come. But in terms of an agenda, the place that we're going to start is really kind of just thinking about what's the problem here, right? What's keeping social media from really becoming an ROI positive channel at the end of the day? And as we kind of walk through the problem space, we'll start to think about what's the mindset shift that needs to happen here before we can even start to see ROI on social. From there, we'll talk a little bit about social media and how it relates to the funnel. I think many of us kind of look at social media as a top of funnel activity, but where ROI comes into play is looking at things all the way through the funnel, and so we'll spend a little time on thinking about the full funnel. Finally, we'll start to get into some of the actionable pieces, right? What are those simple steps that you can take to make social media an ROI positive channel? We'll then dive into what's the measurement strategies here so that we can actually get some numbers down on paper. We can take that to your management, and we can actually show that social is ROI positive. And finally, if we have time, we'll do a quick demo of Socito to show you some of these concepts in action. We may not have time to get there. I want to prioritize getting your questions answered along the way. And so if we're not able to pop into a demo, that's always something that you can find on our website, and we can have folks kind of reach out to get you on a personalized demo if there's interest in thinking about how you can actually start to automate some of these concepts. So let's start with kind of the first problem area. What's really keeping social media from becoming ROI positive? And we talked a little bit about this in the beginning, but most of us are looking at social media as really playing a role in generating brand awareness, right? It's top of funnel. It's there for engagement and growing a following and getting a PR message out there. It's a place that we have to have a presence because our competitors are on social. But what about demand generation? Why aren't we thinking about social from a demand generation perspective? And a lot of this really comes from the fact that social media marketing really started in a B2C space. And we see this across the board. In almost any technology trend, B2C companies are normally the first adopters. Now, the challenge with social media marketing is that B2C companies really, really care about brand, right? It's about television advertising. It's about building a brand. And we don't necessarily in B2C marketing need to tie things back completely to ROI the way that we do in B2B marketing. And so we need to change that mindset and start to look at social media marketing a little bit differently in a B2B context. The other assumption that we often see with folks is that they're looking at social media just as an isolated channel. So when we think about the B2B marketing mix, you'll commonly see pay-per-click as a channel, search as a channel, maybe content syndication as a channel, events as a channel, email as a channel, and then social is kind of another channel. And all of these are looked at in silos. Now the thing about social is that it's ubiquitous. And to really get true ROI out of social, you've got to think about how social is actually impacting all of those other channels in your marketing mix to continue to show ROI through social media marketing. And then we saw this in the initial kind of graph, right, that 70% of B2B marketers are not able to quantify their ROI. And a lot of that comes from data visibility challenges. Really thinking about this lack of integration between the social media management platforms, your typical kind of Hootsuite, Sprout Social, Sprinkler platforms of the world where you're able to publish out content and do response management, and the marketing automation system, the Marketos, the HubSpots, the Pardots of the world that are really the system of record in a demand generation organization. So the social media systems were built for B2C marketers. They're really there to get your message out and handle responses as they come in. But there's such a huge gap left in between the social media management systems and the marketing automation systems that if you're not thinking about filling that gap, it's going to be very tough to really kind of track the data all the way from the social touch back down to revenue and to ROI. So let's talk a little bit about who's involved in social media marketing at B2B companies. We normally find that there's somebody who's handling social media. Now, in many times in B2B, it's not a full-time person. Maybe it's kind of a part-time piece of a content marketer's job, or maybe you're outsourcing it to an agency, or maybe there is a full-time social media manager. And their job is really to focus on engagement, right? What are the conversations that we're having with our customers and our audience on social? What's the content that we're pushing out through our broadcast approach? And what are some of the things that we're seeing in terms of activities and top-level engagement? Are we growing followers? Are we getting shares? And that's really kind of informing what content goes out. Again, a lot of this is built from really a B2C perspective on social media marketing, which is all about just getting a message out to a broad audience in order to build community and brand. But on the other side of the house, you've got your demand generation marketer, who's really focused on lead generation and a very, very targeted approach, right? As we think about where demand generation is going with account-based marketing and really, really honing in on a target audience, it's about going after 5,000, 10,000 companies or people out there that are in your target audience and only talking to those people and bringing them through the funnel in a very heavily targeted approach. And it looks at outcomes, right? It looks at conversions like how many new leads are we getting, how many leads are turning into MQLs, SQLs, opportunities, revenue. It thinks about a buyer in the context of a buyer's journey and different funnel stages. And there's a lot of incongruency between these two parties in the organization, whereas you have the social pro thinking a little bit more from a PR, communications, broadcast perspective, and you've got a demand generation manager really focusing on lead gen, targeted, one-to-one nurtures and moving people through a buying cycle. And that's part of the problem, right? I mean, we really need to get these two roles talking if we're going to turn social media into an ROI positive channel at the end of the day. So we've talked a little bit about the problem space. Now, let's talk about what happens if we start to switch that mindset, right? We've recognized that, hey, we might be taking a mindset to social that was really born out of B2C marketing, and as a B2B marketer, we've got to change that mindset and think about social a little bit more like what we would traditionally think of as demand generation. So what does that look like? Well, it all starts with the audience, right? When you think about demand generation, you're speaking to somebody very, very specific. You've got a definition of who's a qualified lead. You might even know all of the companies where those contacts already exist. You know their job titles. You know what they're thinking about, what events they're going to, what they're reading. And frankly, as B2B marketers, we just don't really care about the people who don't fit into that definition, right? It's about really going after the folks that are going to have a high lifetime value, are going to turn into deals at the end of the day. And the difference, again, between B2B marketing and B2C marketing is that if somebody doesn't fit that definition in B2B marketing, we don't want to pass them to sales, right? We don't want our sales team spending a bunch of time on people who aren't in our ideal target audience. So for a social media marketer, somebody who's handling social at a B2B company, you've got to start here. Are you talking to the right people? Are the folks that you're interacting with and engaging with on social, are they in the buyer personas that you've developed as a demand generation and a marketing organization? And frankly, we should be thinking about it from the perspective of every single person that we interact with on social, every single piece of content that goes out, is this somebody that at the end of the day we would want to pass to sales, or at least could be somebody that we pass to sales as they continue to get nurtured over time. So the one question tends to come up, right? We're B2B. Are our customers even on social media, right? I mean, I think that we start to switch this mindset and, let's hypothetically say that we're a large technology company. We're selling to CIOs at very large companies, maybe IT administrators at these companies as well. Are they on social? Can we find them on social? If we don't want to talk to anybody else, is it even worth being on social? Well, the answer here is that everybody is on social, right? We now know that social media is ubiquitous. And it could be that your customers are on Facebook and they're really chatting with their family and their friends. It could be that they're on Twitter talking about the topics that are on their mind right now. What are they reading? What events they're going to? They're probably on LinkedIn with a professional profile and helping themselves kind of advance through their careers and connect with folks in their network. They're there. And really the question that we as B2B marketers have to answer is, how do we find them? Because in B2C marketing, it doesn't really matter, right? If I'm Nike or I'm Tide, hey, listen, I'm talking to a very, very broad audience. But with B2B, if we come back to that notion of, I know what a qualified lead is, and I only want to talk to people that look like that, then really the challenge becomes, how do we find them, right? We know that they're there, but how do we actually find them? We've got to answer that question if we're really going to be talking about ROI. So how do we find these people? Well, before we go down the route of how do we find these folks on social media, let's just go back to our demand generation thinking here and think about how do we find our target market in general. So in demand generation organizations, again, we've typically kind of built out a buyer persona, but what we've also started to do is think about how do we actually find these people? What channels do we reach them through? So again, going back to kind of, your typical demand generation mix, events play a big role in that. So what are the events that your audience, your target audience, is visiting on a yearly basis, on a monthly basis? What are the influencers that those people are following, reading, or paying attention to? What are the keywords that in your demand generation organization you're really optimizing so that you show up on the first page in Google, or maybe you're buying a keyword in pay-per-click? And once you start to think through that, now we can translate it back to social media. And in social media, one of the key differences between social and traditional lead generation is that you get these real-time updates. So traditionally, a lead list has normally been a row on an Excel spreadsheet. It's been a job title, a company, a location, and that's it, some static biographical information. But what's changed with social is that we're all publishing real-time information about what we're interested in today, what events we're going to, and what we're reading. So as you think about finding your target audience on social, Just like with traditional lead generation, we want to think about what's their bio, right? What's their static information like job titles and locations and company sizes. But we also want to think about what are they doing in real time. And those real-time indicators should map back directly to what we just talked about related to demand generation. So what are the events that you're sponsoring? Let's pull out those hashtags and search for target audience based on those hashtags. Who are the influencers that you're trying to knock on their door and do a guest post with, or maybe you're doing some content syndication with? We should be looking for everybody who's following those people and engaging with those people and defining that as the target audience that we actually want to be going after on social media. What about the people who are using your SEO keywords on social? Those are other folks that are really going to be in your target audience. And then, of course, on the biographical side, it's the same definitions that are already in your buyer personas. What are their job titles, their company sizes, their locations? And that's going to really help us understand who should we be talking to on social media, who should we be engaging with, and what content should we be publishing. So let's just look at what that actually looks like in action, right? We talked about biographical versus conversational. You can see on my profile here, and on almost every social network, this in particular is Twitter, but almost every social network kind of has this pattern built in, right? On the left side here, you're seeing my static biographical information. Who am I? What's my job title, my interests, my location, my community that I'm following? And on the right side is the conversational piece, the real-time information. What am I interested in? Lead generation, automation, what events am I going to? What am I reading? So start to split out and think about what your social media buyer persona is in relation to these kind of two aspects, biographical and conversational. So now that you've started to think about that, let's actually find your audience on social networks. And the first step is to start searching these things. So here's an example of some conversational keywords that we might be looking at to find folks who are in advertising, marketing, or in the startup community. For example, people who follow or engage with Techstars or Startup Pros or Startup America, those are obviously folks who might be in a startup community. People who go to South by Southwest who use this hashtag are probably in the startup community. Maybe people who are using the keyword fundraising or investors, those would be folks in the startup community. And so what I'm now going to do as somebody who's focused on social media marketing and a B2B company is I'm going to set up searches and on a daily or weekly basis go and look for the people who are actually using these keywords in their tweets, in their LinkedIn posts, in their Facebook posts, or maybe even on Instagram, to find the people that are actually in my target audience and who might be starting to enter into a sales cycle, right? They're interested in startups. If I'm providing a service to people who are just starting out or start trying to create a company, then I'm starting to find people who are entering my buying cycle and folks who I want to have a conversation with. So now that we've started to find these folks, what's the next step, right? Coming back to demand generation, the first step is to build out that audience. We just talked about how to do that on social. The next step is to nurture that audience. Take them through a sequence of events and touches that brings them through the different buying stages. And in order to show ROI on social, as social media marketers, we have to follow the same kind of conceptual strategy. So we've found an audience, now let's start to nurture them. And on social, this is actually relatively easy because unlike email, which is where most of the demand generation marketers are playing, social actually builds in multiple engagement types that we can leverage. So we start to think of this as a light touch, medium touch, heavy touch progression. As a light touch, we actually let the social networks do the job for us. We do something very, very light, like following a prospect or a lead or somebody who's in your target audience. We might like one of their posts. We might retweet them. It might be something as light as just looking at their profile on LinkedIn and having that show up in the people who viewed their profile so that we're on their radar. And again, the cool thing about these social networks, unlike email, is that it's sending the notification directly to our prospect on their phone, almost like a text message, on email, and on the social network as a little notification as well. So you're actually getting a very high visibility of the right people seeing you at the right time just by going through these light touches and doing those on a daily, weekly basis. Now, this is just to get somebody on your radar, right? Just like in demand generation, you know, that could be putting your brand out there or a very kind of top of funnel piece of content into a search engine so that people at least know who you are. And as they engage with that content in demand gen marketing, we now know that somebody is captured, we've captured attention with somebody, and we want to bring them to that next stage of being engaged. And the same concept happens on social networks, where after that light touch, if somebody engages back with you, so let's say we follow them and then maybe they follow us or they retweet one of our posts, now we know that they're engaged and we're going to take the next step as a medium touch, which is where we might direct message them. We might comment on one of their posts. We might tweet directly at them. And what this does is it starts to now open up a conversation line that gets this prospect to the next stage in the buyer's journey. Now remember, going back to demand generation marketing, we're still playing at the top of the funnel here, right? We're not going to tell somebody, hey, come get a demo with us right off the bat. But what we do know is that we discovered this prospect because they showed some sort of interest or need. We engaged with them in a light touch. They engaged back, which shows that they're actually interested in us. And now what we can do is provide them a piece of content that might be of value. So think about what are those gated pieces of content that are kind of at the top of your funnel. Maybe a report, a magic quadrant, a webinar, something like this, where we're just bringing people in and we're bringing them knowledge about the problem space that they have to then capture their identity and then nurture them until they're ready for sales. And that's where the heavy touch comes in, right? Once somebody has gotten very engaged and they've gotten value out of their your content, and you've seen that they have a real need or a real want to talk to you, that's where you pass it off to sales, and you have sales reach out for a phone call or an email conversation to actually create a real qualified opportunity out of this prospect that was found on social. So you're starting to see here, by a little bit of a mindset shift, going from this kind of broadcast brand marketing on social to something that looks a little bit more like demand generation, going after a very specific target audience and nurturing them through this process, we're now starting to get closer to ROI, right? Because you're starting to follow this pathway from a contact that didn't even know about you but showed some need to a contact who was engaged to a contact that was actually passed over to sales and that you might be able to track all the way to revenue. So that's the key, is that we've got to follow up with these prospects. If we're going to show revenue at the end of the day and show real ROI, that social conversation, that prospect who fit your qualified buyer persona and who showed interest in you, it has to get passed off to sales in order for you to make that connection back to ROI and get ourselves out of that 70% group that said that they can't quantify ROI from social media. So this is where we've got to connect the two investments. Remember, we talked about that gap between the demand generation system of record and the marketing automation and CRM systems and the social media management systems. So we need to bridge those gaps. And in some cases, this could be as easy as the social media person just sending an email to the appropriate sales rep when they actually have found somebody who showed interest. But really, we want to put a little bit more structure behind this. And that's where it becomes about connecting your social presence with the CRM or the marketing automation system. And so when that person on social actually shows interest, it should go into the marketing automation or CRM system so you actually can follow up with that lead. Again, this can happen manually or it can happen automatically as you start to think about connecting up your two systems. The point here is that this has to happen if you're really going to track ROI from a social perspective. And even if it's as easy as sending a CSV, an Excel file, an email over to your sales team, you've got to bridge this gap. And I think in many marketing organizations today, we're just not thinking about social from this perspective, where, hey, how do we actually get the lead or the contact from social over to sales so that we can close revenue and show ROI? So how do you follow up with leads? Well, traditionally, this is lead nurturing, right? You've got these folks who are coming into your marketing automation system. They've maybe signed up for a webinar, filled out some form, and now we're going to send them a series of emails that continues to nurture them before they're ready for sales. In some cases, people might be ready for sales right off the bat. We fast track them, we send them over to the sales team, and hopefully they close a bunch of revenue very quickly. But in many cases, some of these leads need a little bit of nurturing before they actually get passed over to sales. Now the problem is that your demand generation manager is probably mostly using email for nurturing. And the challenge is that open rates are declining on email, the channel is getting more and more cluttered, click-through rates are going down. And so when we think about social, this now becomes another channel for lead nurturing. Well, we talked about that progression of light touch, medium touch. Now that they're following you, you're tweeting out to them, they're seeing your content. But you also can actually start to get more email engagement from leveraging some of the cues that have happened on social. So, for example, if your audience member tweets about an industry influencer that you have just done a joint webinar with, that's the email that they should get. And because they tweeted about that influencer, their likelihood of opening that email or clicking on that email is going to be much higher. So you want to take a note of that. You want to switch their nurture campaign based on the social insight. And this is coming back to that whole notion that social can't just be a siloed channel. It's got to work with email. It's got to work with search. It's got to work with your event strategy to really get ROI at the end of the day. Another great example here, let's say that somebody is tweeting about an event, a conference, using that conference hashtag that you're going to have a presence at, that you're sponsoring. Well, can you capture those individuals and send them to your team that's down at that event so that they can get more meetings at your booth and can collect more leads? Absolutely. In many cases, that's going to work better than just having an email strategy before that event. So continue to think about this concept of nurture through multi-channels within your social media strategy in order to get more and more positive ROI out of your B2B social strategy. So we've talked a little bit about nurture. But the other big piece when we think about demand gen, again, going back to that mindset shift from just thinking about social as kind of a broadcast or brand building channel to actually thinking about it as a demand generation channel, well, the other big portion of demand generation is this idea of lead scoring. And what lead scoring does is it really helps marketers understand who's most qualified and almost ready to be passed off to sales based on their activity. The challenge is most lead scoring happens just off of the activities that a lead is taking with your website or your emails. So you're not actually getting any signals at the top of the buyer's journey where somebody might be researching competitors or researching the space as a whole without even knowing about you yet. But this is the great advantage of social, is that even before somebody knows who you are, you actually know who they are, what they're thinking about, what they're talking about, who they're engaging with. And you want to think about how do you bring social into your lead scoring, into your identification of who are the most qualified leads. So as a social media manager, if somebody is retweeting you, that's an endorsement of your content. That should get scored maybe the same as downloading or registering for a webinar. Somebody who follows you is a proactive step to subscribe to your content. Maybe that's the same score as somebody who signs up for your email newsletter or subscribes to your blog. people who follow an influencer in your space. Those are people who are just starting the journey to investigate the problem area that you might be able to help them with. Shouldn't that be scored maybe the same as somebody who went to an event or somebody who opened up an email? But this is one place that I think is a blind spot for many B2B social media marketers, because you're getting all of this data, you're just not tying it back to the actual funnel and where people are in their journey before they're becoming customers. And if you can put that extra touch on them, or if you can add that extra piece of data into the CRM that helps that lead become an opportunity or become closed revenue, social is now having a seat at the table in terms of ROI, in terms of really moving people through to higher conversion rates and more revenue at the end of the day. And now we're kind of getting into the bottom of the funnel, right? One aspect of demand generation that you'll find is that people just go cold, right? Your sales team tried to reach out to them. They were really great leads. They just didn't engage for whatever reason. Or maybe your sales team was working a deal with somebody. That deal kind of went to closed lost because the timing wasn't right, or maybe the person didn't have budget. And so how can you use social to actually re-engage with these folks? You're now really playing at the bottom of the funnel. Remember, social can't just be thought of as a top of funnel activity. And the further down the funnel that you go, the closer you are to actually impacting ROI. And so if you can take those folks who have gone cold, who haven't visited your website, who haven't opened an email, and start to proactively nurture them on social, where you're going to have a higher likelihood of engaging with them, where you can add more context to the conversation, you're now really, really close to ROI, because you're actually engaging with people that your sales team has said are a priority, but they've gone cold and they have no other way to reach them. Now you're really getting a seat at the table to help in the sales process and help close revenue. And then we talked a little bit about how do you take social and really kind of meld it within your other channels and other activities. One thing that B2B marketers find a lot of ROI on is events. Going and sponsoring events, speaking at events, having an in-person presence at events, because the audience is so tight and you're able to have such a deep engagement with them to actually move them through your funnel. So how, as a social media marketer, can you impact that and get even more revenue out of the event stream? Well, we talked about it. If people are tweeting about that event, let's make sure that you're setting up meetings with the folks on the ground who are at that event. If somebody is in the session where somebody from your company is speaking about a topic and they're tweeting about it or they're mentioning it on social media, shouldn't that person get sent to sales? Shouldn't you capture that information and pass them into your CRM so that a salesperson can actually go and reach out to them? Maybe the person on the ground didn't have a chance to collect a business card, but that person just sat through an hour-long session learning all about your company and the problem space that you're able to provide a solution in. That's somebody that your sales team should really, really be talking to at the end of the day. You know, we've seen great success with our clients on just this front alone. Dynamic Signal is a company who's a client of ours, and they do a lot of event marketing. They send their folks around through a thought leadership strategy to go and present at different events in their locations. And just by taking on this strategy, where they're looking for the same people who are in those events, tweeting those hashtags, and then passing those contacts to sales, they are doubling the amount of opportunities that they're creating from their event strategy. Now that is some true ROI. I mean, if you think about, on average, as a B2B marketer, maybe we're spending 10, 20, 30, 50K on each event, and you're able to double the amount of opportunities coming out of that event, well, that is some true ROI that you can put on a slide and send up to your CMO, to your CEO, to your VP of marketing, because you're really impacting revenue there. You're taking a $50,000 spend and you're doubling the outcome just through social. So again, think about how you can take social and juice more ROI out of the other activities and channels where there is a proven ROI calculation, because that's going to allow you to measure and really show the impact that social is making on your demand generation cycle and on the ROI that your organization is tracking at the end of the day. So we talked a little bit about how we need to think about social throughout the full funnel, right? We can't just think of it as something that's kind of playing at the top of the funnel, generating awareness, and then hopefully people kind of make it in and kind of move through. And we've talked about, some of these activities that we can do in terms of re-engaging with people at the bottom of our funnel, in terms of connecting awareness as a contact into the CRM or the marketing automation system. But let's kind of go through each stage of the funnel and really talk about how social can impact it. So at the very top of the funnel is kind of a known contact, right? Somebody who we can put into the CRM or the marketing automation system. They're probably not ready to go to sales just yet, but what we can do from social is find the folks through that targeting and using that real-time behavior to actually put the right contacts into our system at the end of the day. So this is where we've got to connect social with CRM or marketing automation so that the social team can get credit for that, because we are the people who found those contacts at the end of the day and got them into the funnel in the first place. Now, once you've got a contact in your system, normally the next stage is to get them into some sort of engaged or active interest state. And this is where, again, finding those qualified leads based on those activities gives you a way to actually engage with them through that kind of nurture process that we talked about, the light, medium, and heavy touch. So you can actually take these folks from cold contacts who might be researching or talking about your space to folks who are actively engaged with you. Maybe they followed you, maybe they went to a piece of content, but now we're starting to move them through that buyer cycle, right? We went from somebody who just kind of knows about the space and is doing some active research to now somebody who knows about us and is actually engaged with our brand and our company. And then we need to get them to a marketing qualified lead, right? Somebody who's taken enough action that they would actually get passed over to the sales team. And this is where you're able to send them pieces of content, a gated piece of content that is actually going to get them qualified enough to go over to sales. So in many cases, this is an ebook, a white paper, a webinar. But the great thing about social is that as you send these direct messages to people who've shown that interest in you, they're going to really thank you for that valuable content, and they're then going to get even more qualified before being passed off to sales. So I'll give you a little bit of an example. So on email, we normally see about 1 or 2% average click-through rates on emails that are going out from the marketing automation system. On social, when you're direct messaging folks who have followed you, they've shown that interest, they tweeted about something relevant in your industry, and you're now providing them with a valuable piece of content, we see averages of 10 to 20% click-through rates. So you're getting a 10x lift on engagement by leveraging the social channel to move these folks through your funnel and actually get them interested and ready for sales at the end of the day. And then finally, once they're past to sales, this is where you can actually help speed up the sales process, right? As that lead is tweeting about certain things, if you can provide that information to your sales rep, they're going to be able to have a better conversation. They're going to be able to increase their connect rates. You're able to lead score them and send the right people to sales. All of that is going to help your sales team get even more efficiency, accelerate the sales process, and actually increase conversion rates at the bottom of the funnel, where traditionally we haven't really thought about social playing, but where you can have a very big impact and have a very close tie back to revenue and ROI at the end of the day. So let's talk a little bit about what are the steps to actually make social media an ROI positive channel. Well, the first step is make a plan, right? We've got to think about, again, who's that target audience, what social networks are we going to be on, and where are we going to find these folks, and then, exactly how we're going to engage with them through our existing demand generation strategy. So for example, are we going to use social in conjunction with our event strategy? Are we going to tie social back to our marketing automation system? Are we going to use social to link people to our gated content? Are you going to use it for social lead scoring? start to think about what's the right starting point for you, right? Let's not take all of this on at once, but start with a plan that's going to take you from where you are today, maybe just kind of broadcasting some tweets or some posts out, to actually thinking about what are the connection points back to ROI. And once you've thought about that plan, the next step is to define KPIs. And this is where you really want to just think about, like, what are the existing KPIs in your marketing organization that leadership and executives look at from an ROI perspective. So in many B2B marketing organizations, that's an MQL. It's a marketing qualified lead. It's somebody who fits the qualification definition and has showed enough interest to get ready to pass off to sales. So that might be the KPI for social, is how many MQLs are you actually creating at the end of the day. It could be clicks, or it could be engagement. It could be tying things all the way back down to revenue. But whatever that KPI is and for your organization, start to look at that from a social perspective and define what your social goals are going to be around that KPI, because without it, you're not going to be able to track ROI. So step 3, you now want to think about adopting technology. Again, ROI is tracked through technology, right? It's normally happening in your CRM or marketing automation system. And so you want to find ways that you can start to connect social into those marketing automation systems at the end of the day, so that you can get credit for the ROI that you're creating as somebody who's managing the social presence. And then finally, we need to pull out those reports. We've got to actually measure ROI, and we'll talk about some of the ways that you can do that when it comes to B2B social media marketing. So, step 1, come up with that initial use case. Again, we're going to define the criteria for the target audience. We need to think about what that nurture stream is going to look like on social. What is that end piece of content that you want to drive prospects to that's gated, that allows you to capture the contact, and that will help people get over that MQL or kind of qualified lead line. What is it that you want these prospects to do, right? At what point are they ready for sales, and what's your strategy going to be in following up with these leads? Come up with that plan, start to think about it for your target audience and your demand generation cycle. And frankly, this should be a conversation with the 2 personas that we talked about at the beginning of this presentation. Really, the demand generation folks and the social folks need to come together to define this strategy, because ROI comes from that partnership between demand generation and social media. So step 2, what are the key metrics that we want to look at? Again, in partnership with demand generation, let's figure out what are the key KPIs that are being looked at from an ROI perspective. So is it purely the number of new leads coming from social, the new contacts that you're putting into the marketing database? Is it the number of qualified marketing leads, MQLs that are coming over? Is it tying social back to funnel velocity, decreased sales cycles, maybe increased conversion rates? Is it tied back to actual revenue? That could be a multi-touch attribution model that you're running. It could be a simple any touch, first touch, last touch model that you're using. It could be correlating social back to deal sizes and average selling prices. Or you can start to use a comparative model where you look at what are the costs that other channels are bringing in terms of leads, and then look at those cost per leads for socially engaged leads versus other leads, and kind of come up with an ROI calculation from that perspective. But start here, and this really should be kind of an understanding of just what your organization is doing from a KPI perspective to track ROI all up, and this will be a great starting point to start to think about how do those KPIs translate back to social. It can't just be retweets, shares, follows. We've got to think about how those true kind of top level social KPIs actually translate back to the ROI KPIs that the business is tracking all up. You know, really the thought process here is like, what's going to get me into the boardroom at the end of the day, right? What does the board care about? What does the CEO care about? What are the KPIs and metrics landing on their plate? Well, that's where you want to start to think about how we can have an impact there from a social perspective. All right, from there we want to think about adopting for technology. And this is where you can start to think about technology on a couple different kind of variations. This is where Socito plays. We kind of help with a lot of these pieces, but some of your existing systems may help here as well, or maybe you kind of do it manually to begin with. So the first thing that we talked about is targeting. What technologies can you use to actually run those searches that we talked about? Is it somebody from your team going to Twitter directly and running these searches manually on a daily or weekly basis? Is it setting up a queue in something like Hootsuite or Sprout Social to always be running those searches? Or is it something a little bit more advanced to actually triangulate exactly who that target audience is at the end of the day? From there, what's that engagement workflow? What technology are you using to enable that? So again, are you manually going to the social networks, doing the light touches, the medium touches? Are you doing that manually through your social media management systems? Or are you using systems to actually automate that workflow, similar to something like Socito might do? The other thing that we think about a lot in demand generation is this notion of A/B testing and conversion rate optimization. That's super hard to do on social, right? Because when you post something, it could be the time of the day that gets you more clicks or shares. It could be, the people who are following you that month versus the next month. But if you actually think about A/B testing through the direct messages and the one-to-one nurtures that you're doing, you can constantly get better, right? So what are the systems that are going to help you to actually do that testing? What are the systems that will help you integrate into your marketing automation and CRM systems, right? So when that person follows you, who should be a qualified lead, is a new lead record actually being created in marketing automation or CRM? Is that something that you're doing manually? Are there integrations between your social media systems and your marketing automation systems? That's going to connect what's going on social back to ROI at the end of the day. And then where are you generating those reports? Is that in a BI intelligence tool like a Domo or a Tableau? Is that coming out of your social media system, out of your marketing automation system, or out of a social media demand generation system similar to Socito? And then finally, we want to measure ROI. Now there's a couple different approaches here that we'll talk about because again, this is obviously the meat of the presentation, right? We've got to take these numbers back to our executives and our leadership teams to show that social is an ROI positive channel and get out of that 70% that's not able to measure social media ROI today. So the first and the most simple approach is what we call the comparative cost approach. So it's just looking at what would you have paid for the actions that you're driving out of social through your other channels. So there's normally, values that are kind of already associated, right? Your marketing team might know that there's a certain cost per lead target or a cost per click target or a cost per contact target, a cost per registration target, and you can actually then look at how much is being generated from social, what's the associated value, and then put that on top of what you're paying to actually generate those different engagements and conversions. So you'll see here an example. Relevant followers that were generated. If these people are actually in your buying persona and are qualified leads, then what's the value there? Is it maybe 50 cents per follow? What would you be paying for social advertising to be generating this audience? And you can start to calculate the value. Clicks to your content. Many times we're already doing pay-per-click programs. There's kind of an average there through the other channels that you're using. What is that average value? In this case, $2.50 is what we pay for a click on AdWords. And so if we're generating a click from social, we know that the value there, again, if it's going to the same content and from just as qualified of a target audience, that value is going to be $2.50. How about registrations? People who actually fill out a form at the end of the day. Many folks are doing cost per lead programs, or they're getting this out of their pay-per-click programs. What's that average value per lead? Industry averages are normally around $50 per lead, sometimes as much as $100 per lead. But you can start to look at what are the registrations and the leads that you're driving from social and start to associate a value there. And then same thing with contacts, right? Going and buying contacts and lists is an established industry. Your organization might be doing it today, and there's a value that people are paying per each of those leads. Well, if you can export those contacts out of social, you can create new contacts out of social, each of those should have a value and you should be able to calculate what's the value being generated on social versus the cost. So in this case, total value being generated about $12,000. The cost, $4,000. That's an ROI of 191%. We can now take that back to our management, to our executives, and show what's the true ROI of social, and maybe help to get a little bit more budget to start to scale out these programs. Now, the more advanced approach is actually tying social back to revenue contribution. And this is where you've got to find some way to connect social back to that marketing automation or CRM system so you can track those leads all the way down to closed revenue and to opportunities. So the simplest way to do this is when a lead was found on social or a contact was created from social first, we put that into the CRM and the marketing automation system. We wait for a few sales cycles to go by, and then we attribute back the actual end revenue to the social channel. The other way to do this is through multi-touch weighted attribution, where your system, your marketing automation or CRM system, will actually weight all of the different touches that happen. And so even if social was just one touch out of many different touches between email, between webinars, between content syndication, between the sales team, social can get credit for the exact amount of revenue that was actually influenced at the end of the day. And then you calculate the ROI by looking at how much revenue was associated to social minus the cost. You put that over the cost, and that becomes your percentage ROI coming directly out of social. Now, if we can get to this state, it does take some advanced technology, and we've got to get things integrated. But if you can get to this state, then there's no question about exactly how much revenue your social presence is driving. And now you can actually put social on the slide that says, hey, we generated X amount of revenue, just like with your pay-per-click programs, your event programs, your content syndication program. This is kind of nirvana here, right? It's not going to happen overnight, but if you can work towards this state, you're really going to have perfect clarity on how your social investments are paying off at the end of the day. And then, of course, you can kind of compare this to other things like average revenue per customer coming from the channel, what's the conversion rates from MQL to customer, and once you have this data into your CRM or marketing automation systems, you can start to slice and dice it in different ways to show ROI depending on what the priorities of the business really are. Now I'll take a pause here and jump into a quick demo of Socito so you can see some of these concepts in action. I know that we only have about 5 minutes left here, so I do want to get to questions. As your questions kind of come in, you think about them, please put them into the webinar control panel, and we'll get to them as quickly as possible here. I'll spend just a couple minutes in the demo, but as questions come in, I will address them. So now is the time to get your questions answered. Go ahead and put them in right there into the webinar control panel. Obviously, it's a hot topic. I'm happy to discuss things that are specific to your business, maybe your technologies or the way that your demand generation system is set up. So let's look at a little bit of some of these concepts in action. This is what Socito looks like, and you're actually looking at a campaign of one of our campaigns that we're running to kind of reach a marketing technology audience. And what you're seeing here is the prospect search set up directly to what we were talking about at the beginning of this presentation around targeting. So the conversational versus the bio. And you'll see that we're tracking a whole bunch of conversational keywords that are directly related to the other activities that we're doing within demand generation. So everybody following or retweeting the Chief Marketing Technology Officer, we want to know about. Anybody who's using keywords like marketing automation, hashtag marketing automation, we want to find those people and know about those leads. We want to look at folks who might be using platforms like Eloqua or Adobe Marketing Cloud. We'll pick those folks up by running searches like this on Twitter. But then we also want to look at that biographical perspective, right? So actually looking at how do people describe themselves? Do they describe themselves as a CMO, as a demand generation marketer? And this is where actually combining Twitter profiles to LinkedIn profiles are helpful. Socito does that automatically, and so even if somebody doesn't necessarily describe themselves as a chief marketing officer in their Twitter profile, we're still able to pick up that data and surface that prospect at the end of the day. Now you'll see here the prospects are coming up. We've found folks who kind of fit that definition, and then we're putting them into this automatic nurture to kind of warm them up and get them into our sales funnel itself. So you'll see here we kind of follow them initially. That's that light touch. We can add them to a Twitter list, another light touch. We can like their tweet, another light touch. We've now gotten on their radar. When they engage back with us, we take it to a medium touch, and that's where we actually send them a templatized direct message that uses their first name, is very personalized, and sends them to that top of funnel piece of content where somebody can register and then actually cross over to that MQL state. You'll see we enable direct message A/B testing here to help with that conversion rate optimization as you continue to run these campaigns. So with just a few minutes left here, we'll pop into the reports and kind of see how some of this gets tied back down to ROI. So you'll see in a month here, we were able to generate 1,700 people, real true leads who fit that target audience, to follow us, engage with us, and show their interest in us. Of those, 75 people clicked on that link to go directly to our landing page where they can sign up for a piece of content. You'll see here at an 11% click-through rate, right? So compare that to what you guys are getting on email, and you're probably able to get a lot more leverage out of these social channels because folks are so engaged and because you're sending them very personalized and contextual information. And the great thing here is that you can simply set up a tracking pixel and actually track how many of these contacts registered at the end of the day as an MQL. And this is where you can come back to that comparative analysis to say, hey, a goal conversion for us is worth $50, maybe $100. All right, here's the amount of value that we generated over the last month or so. Now going further than that, again, we want to capture every single person who showed interest and put them into our marketing automation system. You'll see Socito is doing that automatically for us. All these contacts are getting synced into Marketo, and then we're putting them onto these email nurture programs. And so, you know, we got our 75 clicks directly here on social, but we drove another 772 clicks through the email nurtures. We're getting even more website visits, form fills by nurturing them through Marketo. And then you're seeing how many of them are actually getting passed to sales and converted into opportunities. So again, here's where that real bottom of the funnel tracking starts to come in, because this is stuff that's getting directly passed to sales and that you're going to be able to attribute revenue on top of. And then you'll see here kind of results from an A/B test, so you can constantly optimize the content that you're sending, the messaging that you're sending, as well as the keywords that you're using to continue to define and refine that bio, persona, and targeting that you might be going after. So it's a very short demo of Socito. You know, we'd be happy to kind of send you more information, and you can see more information on our website. But this really kind of encapsulates how you should be thinking about social media to really get down to ROI at the end of the day and take social from what's in many B2B organizations kind of a cost center. It's justified by, you know, broadcast communications, engagement, brand building, to something that really is a profit center, shows ROI, and impacts that demand generation cycle at the end of the day. Take these steps slow. It's simply a mindset shift can really help here to start generating that ROI. And take some of these steps, right? Some of these things you can try tomorrow just by going and searching some of those keywords, engaging with some prospects with a light nurture flow, and then really kind of bringing those folks back into your marketing automation platforms. Lastly here, it looks like a quick question came up around costs of Socito. We do charge based on volumes and based on your custom needs. So depending on whether or not you have a marketing automation platform and you want an integration turned on, we'll have different packages for you. Depending on how many email addresses you need, how many prospects you're looking for on a daily basis, we'll have many different packages for you. So feel free to head to our website. There's a pricing page there where you can learn a little bit more about how we price, but everything is customized. And so, you know, go ahead and shoot a request for pricing in that page, and we'll have one of our sales reps contact you to learn a little bit about your exact custom needs, how you judge ROI, and then we'll build out the right package for you so that you can really see ROI in a matter of 3 to 6 months. That's normally kind of our target timeline that we like to see with our clients, so that we can show real ROI based on the cost of the license in a matter of 3 to 6 months, and that's really why we customize these packages for you. All right, I know we're a minute over, so thank you everybody for attending today. This is a topic that's really close to home for us, and we just find that so much of the social media marketing materials out there are really geared towards more B2C marketers, and so this is something that we love to inform you about. If you have further questions, please do reach out to us. Always happy to educate on how to take social from a cost center in a B2B context to ROI positive. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day, and looking forward to having more conversations with you in the future.